What's up, y'all? You know what time it is. It's about to be that time.
What's up, YouTube? Welcome to the latest episode of the Layup Line. Today we're going to be talking about all the new head coaches in the Western Conference. I recently dropped a video talking about the new head coaches in the East. I'm going to link that below as well if you haven't seen it yet. It is a bit of a longer one, but I think I touched upon a lot of really great and informative stuff. But nonetheless, let's get started with this video. First Western Conference franchise I wanted to take a look at is the Los Angeles Clippers, who went into the season under head coach Doc Rivers, who led them to a 49-23 record. They also had a second-ranked offense and a fifth-ranked defense. There isn't anything in the regular season numbers that would indicate the Clippers should have gotten rid of Doc Rivers. However, you can nitpick the defensive stuff. You can maybe say that he could have gotten more out of that team on defense, but with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George missing games due to load management and injury, I'd say maybe we can cut up some slack there. The reason Doc Rivers no longer has a job with the Clippers, however, is because this team wasn't built for the regular season. I think the Clippers put this team together understanding that during the regular season, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George would miss games, which is why they relied so heavily on their bench scorers in Montrezl Harrell and Lou Williams. But when it came around time for the playoffs, there were just issues with the rotation that Doc Rivers never really was able to iron out. Now you can say that's because the season was cut short. They also had some trades that changed up the roster, and just it was not an ideal situation for the season to have stopped and resumed in a bubble. That's the case for every team, but I guess you can see how it particularly harmed the Clippers. It also didn't really help Doc Rivers that the Clippers ended up blowing a 3-1 lead in the conference semifinals. Now, it was embarrassing, and of course everyone got their jokes off at the Clippers' expense, but as a front office, I could see a situation in which they didn't overreact to losing in the conference finals the way they did, because their season was stopped and started abruptly in a way that we've never really seen before at all. And there was so many extenuating circumstances with Lou Williams being out and Montrezl Harrell missing some time as well. So I could have seen the Clippers deciding to run it back with that same squad. The factor that weighs the heaviest in Doc's firing for me is the fact that it is his third 3-1 lead that's been blown in the playoffs, 2 with the Los Angeles Clippers. So just from an image perspective, it was probably best to move on from him. But as Doc, I'm sure he's feeling like he didn't necessarily put the team together. And he also can't make guys make shots. You know, like if guys are just missing wide open shots, that's more so on the players than on the coach. Did Doc optimize his rotation to not blow that 3-1 lead? No, he didn't. Probably kept Montrezl Harrell in too often, didn't match up with JaMychal Green or Ivica Zubac often enough. But he can't make Paul George make those shots, and he just did not perform in that Game 7, and neither did Kawhi. The Clippers have decided to replace Doc Rivers with assistant coach Tyronn Lue, who was a championship head coach in his own right in 2016 with the Cavaliers. They've also brought on a star-studded list of assistant coaches to come in behind Tyronn Lue as well. Now, I think the Tyronn Lue hire was a pretty smart one. Ty Lue was well regarded in pretty much every head coaching search in this offseason, so the fact that the Clippers were able to retain him and bring him in as the head coach is certainly a win for them. Under Tyronn Lue, I think we'll see the Clippers become a lot more versatile. Ty Lue was credited with a lot of the adjustments that 2016 Cavs team made in order for them to come back from a 3-1 lead. Some of the switching things they did, how they targeted Steph Curry in pick and roll. And I think if a lot of that adaptability was in the Clippers head coaching seat this past season, we might not have seen them blow that 3-1 lead.
The Clippers right now have no answers for the Nuggets.
But right when they put pressure on us, honestly, I just thought we didn't come through.
George, way off. It's the side of the backboard. And Jokic with yet another.
The next Western Conference team up for discussion is the New Orleans Pelicans, who went into the season under head coach Alvin Gentry, who led them to a 17th ranked offense and a 19th ranked defense. Now, the New Orleans Pelicans had an average roster age of 25, with 6 players under 25 averaging over 15 minutes per game. With a team this young, you rarely see results, particularly on the defensive end where the team was below average. The Pelicans also struggled in the first part of their season where they were missing first overall pick Zion Williamson. Williamson would return in late January, where the pandemic would only give him a few months with the team before interrupting their back-to-back wins that ended a 3-game losing streak that was about to kick off the easiest half of their schedule. The Pelicans would enter the NBA's return highly favored to capture the 8th playoff spot in the Western Conference, but they underperformed in the bubble and generally looked disconnected as a team. The organization would decide to part ways with head coach Alvin Gentry after the Pelicans' departure from the NBA bubble, and would ultimately decide to replace him with former Detroit Pistons head coach Stan Van Gundy. One notable aspect of the hiring is the reuniting of JJ Redick and head coach Stan Van Gundy, who had his most successful stint as a coach in the NBA with the 2009 Orlando Magic, who made it to the NBA Finals. JJ was rumored to be an advocate in bringing Stan to New Orleans, which has caused many to speculate on the hiring being a sign that the organization is focused on competing right now and staying competitive with veterans such as JJ Redick, Drew Holiday, and Derek Favors, who were two of the team's better defenders this past season. But ultimately, Stan Van Gundy's job will be to get this team to defend and find an offensive fit for Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson together. At the end of the day, the Pelicans are a really young team that are sitting on a ton of assets from the Anthony Davis trade that'll allow executive David Griffin and head coach Van Gundy to make the appropriate moves with the team and even to pivot off of them in key positions should things look like they're not working out.
And the last thing I said to him, I said, look, man, don't this up for me.
He did. It was so funny. Like he had just gave me some great advice, and then, I mean, the whole mood shifted. He was like, I'm 13 for 13. Don't mess this up for me. I'm like, JJ, why are you telling me? I'm a rookie.
The next Western Conference team up for discussion is the Houston Rockets, who were led by head coach Mike D'Antoni, who led them to a 44-28 record, a 6th ranked offense, and a 14th ranked defense. Now, there are really two versions of this 2019-20 Houston Rockets team. The one that started the season with Clint Capella at the starting center. This version of the team is where Harden poured in some of his more explosive offensive performances of the season, whilst Russell Westbrook was playing injured, recovering from an off-season injury. The second version of the team is probably far more interesting, where Daryl Morey opted to trade the starting center Clint Capella out and fully commit the team from going small ball to micro ball. The average height of the starting lineup was around 6'4". Head coach Mike D'Antoni and GM Daryl Morey decided that it was best to prioritize 3-point floor spacing, and the team would go on to play a very specific brand of basketball after the Capella deal. The deciding floor spacing was the most important thing to them. On the season, the Rockets averaged 45 3-point field goal attempts per game, which was 17 more than the last place Indiana Pacers. Players on the Rockets knew that the shot profile Mike D'Antoni was trying to get was shots at the rim or shots from 3 or free throws. You weren't going to be allowed to take mid-range jumpers except for Russell Westbrook, who was allowed to take 41% of his shots from the mid-range. The Rockets averaged 3.2 field goal attempts from 10 to 14 feet compared to the Spurs, who had the highest in the league at 11 per game. At this point, Mike D'Antoni was just playing out a math equation. After the Capella deal, the team upticked in 3-point attempts, going up to 48.6 3-point attempts per game after the Capella deal. Now, the Rockets aren't an elite 3-point shooting team, but on 48.6 3-point attempts per game, even at their 34% on 3-point field goal attempts, that's nearly 50 points a game from the 3. Mike D'Antoni decided to truly just lean into the things that this Rockets roster was best at and avoid the things that they could not do well. One area of focus for this team moving forward is certainly going to be the defensive end, because when you take away your 7-foot-tall rim protector, you make it a lot easier for the offense to get shots at the rim, second chance points. But the Rockets were very smart to key in on this early, because they didn't allow teams to increase their number of offensive rebounds per game, even after the Capella deal, keeping them to around 11.5 offensive rebounds. They also didn't let you score on those second chance points off of those offensive rebounds, keeping teams to around 14 second chance points, which is the same as when they had Capella on the roster. After mutually parting ways with head coach Mike D'Antoni, the Rockets have decided to bring in first-time head coach Stephen Silas. Stephen Silas is the son of former head coach Paul Silas and has been an assistant for 20 years in the NBA. Stephen Silas was most recently an assistant with the Dallas Mavericks, who had the league's best offensive rating ever in league history. We've been told that Stephen Silas's role with the Mavericks last year was as the offensive coordinator, which bodes well for the Houston Rockets moving forward, especially considering Stephen Silas's experience with all-star level guards like Kemba Walker in Charlotte and Steph Curry in Golden State. Luka Doncic was also very complimentary of the hiring of Stephen Silas, really giving him credit for part of his growth into an all-NBA level player this past season. The Rockets now have 2 former league MVPs and a head coach that projects to be one of the more brilliant offensive minds that we see in the coaching role. However, their long-term future is still particularly bleak given the number of draft picks that they've traded trying to increase their championship window these past couple years, and the fact that their 2 stars are on the wrong side of 30.
Okay? Because if for some reason we had a horrible year and we thought we needed to make a coaching change, we just got through paying off one of the other coaches, I believe. So I hope we win a championship and Mike comes and puts a gun to my head.
The final team up for discussion is the Oklahoma City Thunder, who went into the season under head coach Billy Donovan, who led them to a 44-28 record with the 16th ranked offense and a 7th ranked defense. Now, this Oklahoma City team had a lot of speculation about how they'd perform during the season, just because they traded their 2 best players in the past offseason, Paul George and Russell Westbrook, in exchange for Chris Paul, Danilo Gallinari, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and a number of draft picks. As a result of those trades, the team's roster was now comprised of veterans who were aiming to win a championship and young players who were probably not good enough to help them on that pursuit. We've seen situations like this turn out real ugly for a team when your veterans who want to win now don't exactly mesh or buy in with your young guys and help them develop. I mean, Oklahoma City this past season was just a more talented version of that Cleveland roster, yet this organization was really able to make something work out of it. This is where you really have to give credit to head coach Billy Donovan. In past seasons, I thought Billy Donovan-led teams often were losing games that they were supposed to win, but this season, it turns out the Thunder won a lot of games that I thought they should have lost, and they had fantastic clutch numbers. Chris Paul was one of the best clutch players in the past season for them. He also played an extremely high number of games, didn't suffer from a lot of injuries, and maintained health on the roster in general. The Oklahoma City Thunder also ran a very strong 3-guard lineup often of Dennis Schroeder, Chris Paul, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, which was a real driving force for them in those fourth quarters when they were closing out games in the clutch. Billy Donovan and the team have agreed to mutually part ways after what is likely his best showing as the team's head coach, due to the fact the organization appears to be headed towards a rebuild. The offseason has been full of speculation about a potential Chris Paul trade. Steven Adams and Dennis Schroeder are also veterans who could potentially be on the move, and Danilo Gallinari does not appear like he'll be returning to the team this season. We've also just learned that the Oklahoma City Thunder will be hiring first-time head coach Mark Daigel. Mark spent some time with the team as an assistant coach this past season, but prior to that, he spent 5 seasons as the head coach of the team's G League organization. He was a pretty successful coach at the G League levels, and it makes sense to bring a guy like him in if they're headed towards a rebuild. Regardless of if they move any of those veterans, his job will be identifying talented young players to develop like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Luguentz Dort, Darius Bazley, and also identify good locker room vets to keep or acquire that will hopefully be able to play some minutes for you as well. But that's all for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in to the latest episode of the Layup Line. If you appreciated today's video, if you learned something new, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content coming soon. Thank you and have a wonderful day.